Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at this, our third Task Force Campus Conversation. I'm Rose Martinelli, and I'm the Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, and I am so pleased to be a part of the Strategic Budget Initiative in the role of facilitator. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our Research and Innovation Task Force and introduce you to our co-chairs. Anissa Abi-Dargham. She is the Associate Vice President for Clinical and Translational Science and also Vice Chair for Research in Psychiatry. And John Longtin, who is Associate Dean for Research and Entrepreneurship in the College of Engineering and Applied Science. So thank you both for coming here today. And thank you, more importantly, for serving as co-chairs of such an important task force for us. I look forward to hearing more. For those of you who have dialed in today, we would love to have your questions. So please use the Q&A function and submit your questions as we get going. We plan to spend about 30 minutes or so answering your questions as we can today. So let me remind you about what financial sustainability is. Financial sustainability is basically the critical foundational baseline for any viable institution. But what is the Strategic Budget Initiative here at Stony Brook? It's not about downsizing. It's not about cutting staff positions or reducing faculty. It's really about four things that are fundamental. One is that we want to build upon and invest in our competitive areas of strength. The second is we want to become a better place to work by improving how we work together by streamlining processes. The third is finding ways to remove barriers to collaboration. And finally, it's about innovation and entrepreneurship. How can we be creative and grow who we are to be as productive as we can be? So I want to spend just a couple minutes talking a little bit about the Strategic Budget Initiative and how we're structured. So we are a recommending body. There are 5 task forces that have been created to study areas of opportunity at the institution. These 5 task forces then are combined into the Financial Sustainability Committee. And that group, as we gather together, allows us to see problems and opportunities and where they intersect. This body starts to help us to understand how to communicate more effectively, how to work more collectively well together, and then prioritize the initiatives that we believe are most viable for increasing our financial viability going forward. These ideas and initiatives then go up to the executive leadership for their understanding approval process, and then comes back to the financial sustainability teams and then back down to the task forces. We also have launched a number of working groups that we'll talk a lot more about this afternoon, but it's important to know that we are a recommending body. We are studying this institution from our points of view as experts, faculty, and staff, and identifying ways to improve how it is that we work, create new areas of opportunity to grow revenues or reduce costs, or improve how well we work together. Anissa, to the next slide, please. I'd like to spend just a minute to kind of ground you into where we are in the project timeline. Our work began back in October with the process of defining the scope for each of the task forces and beginning to understand from subject matter experts where there were opportunities for us to consider in the work that we're doing for improving processes, for looking at challenges that we've known about for years, but just haven't had a chance to address. From that point of view, we moved into the following 8 weeks, which is this opportunity identification. So we distilled a lot of information and began to say, so where are there opportunities for us to think about? And then we submitted those ideas to executive leadership in December. We're just now entering phase or step 3, which is this analysis and validation step, which is where we are right now. This is the process of identifying those areas of opportunity and then really diving deeply to understand what it looks like. What are the areas of risk to the institution? What are the costs, the benefits, the implementation difficulties? And that information then will go back up to the task force into the Financial Sustainability Committee to prioritize and then back up into the leadership for us then to move into implementation. So it's an iterative process that are filled with opportunities for us to engage with campus community stakeholders and for us as a team to begin to balance what it is that will work well together and how to sequence the steps so that we can build momentum and collectively work well together as an institution. So as we get started today, I'm really thrilled for you to share a lot about what we've learned. I have sat in these meetings and been astounded with what we've learned about ourselves, what we've always known about ourselves, but we've tolerated, and the ideas to be much more entrepreneurial and ambitious in how we want to move forward as an institution around research and innovation. And so I'm really excited for you to share what you've learned and for us to really think about how we can work better together to amplify our research and to strengthen who we are as Stony Brook University. So I'm going to turn to you, Anissa. Why don't you begin today?
Thank you, Rose. I want to first thank you for your inspiring leadership on what's been a very open, transparent, and inclusive process. It's been really a pleasure and an honor to work with you, my co-chair, John, and an amazing group of people on the task force. I also want to thank everybody who's joined us today because this is really a very important conversation. It is not just about us telling you where we're at, but it's about hearing from you. So please give us your feedback, go to the website, put in questions, comments. If we've ignored the fact that's important or maybe not as important, we want to hear all about it. Email us. So we want to hear from you. You may have recommendations and thoughts that we may not have had. So we want to hear from you. So at this point, I want to tell you what the scope of work was for us as we started. We were tasked with the following: identifying new opportunities and areas of growth for research and innovation. Find about ways of more effective alignments of resources, infrastructure, and ways to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration and innovation. From the beginning, there were two facts that were very important. Our AAU membership, we will spend some time talking about that, and a previous task force that, similar to what we had to do, that occurred in 2017, that was focused on the research infrastructure and how to facilitate researcher success, and made a series of recommendations. Some of them were implemented, but others were not due to cost. And so we wanted to leverage the work done by this task force in 2017 and build upon it. So who was involved? A large group of faculty from different areas of expertise, different campuses and schools, different areas of study, but also different levels of seniority. So we hope that we're able to hear from everyone, have everybody share their expertise and thoughts and their experiences with research at Stony Brook so that we could benefit from that. We also were assisted by an amazing administrative staff support and also subject matter experts. In addition, we heard from leaders within the institution and decision makers such as Dean Kashansky, Dean Nicole Simpson, Interim Provost and Dean of Engineering Fotis Sotiropoulos. We also heard from the VP for Research, Rich Reeder, the VP for Economic Development, Pete Donnelly, and Director Sean Bojkovic, Director of OT-LIR. Also, we heard from many people within the OVPR office, research compliance, and HR even. And all these people shared their very candid views on what's been a challenge for them doing their work at Stony Brook and what are the opportunities that we should be thinking about. So I want to thank them all again for the help that they've given us. We've learned a lot from them. So what are the lessons that we've learned? At this point, I want to first discuss our AAU membership. Being part of the Association for American Universities is really an honor And for Stony Brook, which is a young and relatively small institution, to be part of this is really something that we need to preserve and grow. We will talk a little bit more about our standing within the AU, which is not where we want it to be. And this seemed to be for us a major focus of our work and our recommendations going forward. So we'll get to that. And again, leveraging the facilitating researchers' success seemed like a great opportunity to start from, because there were recommendations made based on extensive studies of the research infrastructure, so we can build upon. We also learned that engaging the entire campus community towards synergistic multidisciplinary research will enhance our research growth. And that is because we have many areas of expertise, but they often function somewhat in silos, and they may not know about each other. And coming together may be kind of a jump start for creative, novel types of research that may not be happening at this point as much as we want. Expanding the Stony Brook research enterprise will benefit not just research, but our entire campus community and the mission of our university, because being great in research will also attract great students. So that will increase our educational productivity and our mission. It will also transpire in other activities we do, such as clinical care or whatever else that each one of us works on. And finally, maybe one of the most important lessons is the importance of culture and morale to achieving research success. So at the base of all of that is the individual part of the university. It was important for us to learn that if we're going to succeed and if we're going to come together, we have to pay attention to everybody. Everybody has to feel that they're heard, that they're part of the conversation, that they're respected, and that their opinion and their work matters. And that was probably our most important lesson that we're building upon. So let me tell you now a little bit about AAU and why that is important for us, especially in terms of the Task Force on Research and Innovation. This is a graph of federal research expenditures in 2015 and 2019. These are the public universities that are part of AAU, so there are like 36 of them out of 65 or so. In the light gray are all the other universities, and in the dark gray is Stony Brook. And as you see, Stony Brook is really in the bottom quartile of this graph. Although expenditures grew between 2015 and 2019, so did everybody else's research expenditure also grow. So our rank, which is 32 out of 36, did not change. And that is really not a position we want to be at, because it's not a safe position. A little move and we could be kicked, I mean, I don't want to say kicked out, but we may be kicked out of AAU. And that is a risk that we cannot take, because it will have a high cost on our reputation, on our capacity to attract funding, and on our capacity to attract great students. If we look at expenditures per FTE, so that is the total amount of federal expenditures per year divided by the number of faculty that are tenured or tenure track, again, for 2015 and then 2019, the situation is a little bit better. So we move up from a rank of 32 to 29, but we are still in the bottom quartile. And we really want to be close to the median or even above. And to arrive at the median, we need to increase research expenditure by about $60,000 per faculty. We're now at $145,000 a year, and we need to be at about 200. To look at our competition a little bit closer, you see here where Stony Brook stands at 145. K per year. Below us is Purdue and Kansas, and above us are some of the other universities such as Rutgers in California, Irvine, Virginia. And you see where the median is in terms of numbers. And if we want to think about our AAU standing and how to improve it, we need to look at these numbers and look at what kind of growth we need to be able to bridge this gap. What are the AAU membership metrics? Well, federal research expenditure is probably one of the most important, but it's not the only one. National Academy membership is important, faculty awards, fellowships, memberships, citations, USDA state industry research expenditures, doctoral education, postdoctoral appointments, undergraduate education. So AAU membership is not just about research. It's really about the importance, the impact of our university, its academic standing, its reputation. And so there's an opportunity for everybody at the university to contribute. For example, in arts or in humanities, writing a book that gets a prize, that will get us citations, that counts as a faculty award. And all of these will count towards our AAU membership. So it's really an opportunity for everybody to be part of this mission of improving our standing within AAU. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, John Longtin.
Thank you, Anissa. And thank you, Rose. And it's an honor to be able to speak with you today. What I wanted to now is talk a bit about the opportunities that we've identified in the task force that we feel have the most potential to be able to continue our evolvement of the research enterprise here. And before we get into the specifics, a couple of comments. The first is that if you've been here for some time and been involved in previous studies, that some of these will have been similar in the past. And I think that the message there is the fact that these have shown up again in our analysis underscores both their importance and, even more important, the necessity to address them. The second thing to mention is that the list is not comprehensive. There's a larger number of terms, and these are the ones that we felt most representative, but we will be analyzing all of the ones that we've identified in the balance of the time that we have on the task force. So with that said, some of the opportunities we've identified are the following. The first is to incentivize and facilitate faculty research productivity. And there really are two parts to that. To incentivize faculty to do research and to expand their research enterprise. It's a creative endeavor at the end of the day. It's not something that can really be forced. So how can we encourage and foster that? And then the companion piece is to facilitate it. So how can we make this as easy as possible and remove as many obstacles as we can? Then a related task to this is to remove administrative roadblocks and streamline the administrative process. And in many respects, this overlays with the facilitating research study that's been mentioned, and in fact, there's a slide on this to follow to talk about how that fits into the bigger picture of what we're doing. Another thrust is to focus on large, multidisciplinary, multi-institutional grants and training grants. And this is really a recognition that of a trend that's already been happening. As a relatively young university, we continue to grow and expand in terms of the target opportunities we pursue. And we've been successful at those. And so this is really an acknowledgement of that continued growth and also the desire to capitalize on that and continue to make this something that we strive for and are successful with. Achieving large grants have both tangible and intangible benefits that benefit us as a campus as a whole. Another theme is the idea of integrating the research infrastructure across the East and West campus. And really, this theme has transpired across all the task force and really is kind of a central theme of everything I think we're doing, this idea of one Stony Brook. And this particular topic, at one level, can be things like homogenizing the information technology infrastructure or the administrative infrastructure or the organization chart that both sides report to in an effort to streamline things. But I think also at a higher level, the opportunity to engage both sides of the campuses a little more frequently. I mean, we're very fortunate, for example, to have a research-grade hospital on campus, and that's a wonderful resource. So how can we work together to be able to do some exciting things? And again, related to that, and in the spirit of the comments that Anissa made, to really strive to build cross-campus collaborations and integration, and to try to move out of the traditional silos that are so easy to find ourselves in. So can we serve as a catalyst to get groups that might not talk to each other, the sciences and the humanities, for example, and see what kind of unique innovations could come from that? Another relative newcomer to the list is to enhance entrepreneurship and industrial interactions. And this is something that's been happening for a long time at Stony Brook and very successfully. But the thinking is we want to bring that more centrally to the conversation and have it play a strong role in terms of our research enterprise as we move forward. Again, on Long Island, we're fortunate to have a lot of high-tech industry and opportunities to transition ideas and concepts that we develop here out into the marketplace. And then lastly is to capitalize on the unique geographic and cultural diversity that we enjoy by living in the New York area. And, you know, this is something that I think we can really capitalize on. I mean, many of you have been involved in faculty searches, and one of the standard things you have to say is when you bring a person on campus, especially if they're from a part of the country where the cost of living is not so high, is you have to caution them, right? Hey, just to let you know, it's expensive here, or the property taxes are here, and so on. But you get something for that, in that it is a very nice place to live, and there's a lot of diversity, and it's a forward-thinking region of the country. And so to be able to ensure that those benefits are also made available to people we may wish to attract as we grow our enterprise and retain folks that are here already. And in sum, for all of these topics, I would mention that, that we recognize that this is not as simple as sending out a memo or checking a box. This really is a cultural change that will be pervasive and take time, and it'll require a constant effort. But the hope then is that that will become fundamental to what it is we want to do across the campus. Now, the facilitating research success has been mentioned a number of times, and a very natural question to ask is, well, how does what that study did, how does that influence what you're doing, and what is the overlap? So I thought it would be worthwhile to go through a little bit what some of the details of that study were. So this was a year-long study that was put into play in 2017 by the upper administration. And it actually came about by a nationwide study that was done that realized that administrative burden was becoming an issue at research universities at large, nationally. And so the Facilitating Research Success study was done at Stony Brook to explore what our particular administrative burdens are. And so as a result of that, the focus was on administrative barriers to research. There were 9 topical areas within that study that focused on things like pre-award, post-award, human resources, procurement, etc. It's a very encompassing and broad study. And then we are bringing those pieces in that are relevant for the research piece. There was a 45-page internal report that was put together and issued to the campus in November of 2017. And then what happens is periodically in Rich Reeder's office, in the Office of Vice President for Research, those recommendations are periodically reviewed. And they were categorized, by the way, in terms of their cost and relative benefit in terms of deciding what to implement. And the latest assessment of that was done in March of this year in terms of what has been done and what remains to be done. But in summary, and perhaps not surprisingly, the low-cost and no-cost recommendations have been implemented, but those that required a little higher investment have not yet been made. So these then fold into our study and become part of our assessment in terms of recommendations to make. So hopefully that'll give you a little sense of how the Facilitating Research study fits into our broader task from a research perspective. And maybe the next slide. So as Rose has mentioned, we're about halfway done. So the question is, what's next? Where do we go from here? And in our task force, we have identified 4 work groups that consist of 15 to 20 members, with one exception. And these are folks from faculty, staff, subject matter experts that will look into some aspects of those opportunities we saw earlier in further detail, and then also to develop a cost-benefit assessment so that finally when we make our recommendations, we can prioritize those that we think will give us the best return for the investment. So the first group is called Enhancing Research Productivity and Effectiveness, and it's co-chaired by Sandeep Malipatu from nephrology and Sarita Bhatia from chemistry. And their focus will be to look at these large multi-collaborator grants, training grants, and streamlining the administrative hurdles. The second working group is the Strategic Research Growth Group. It's co-chaired by Suparna Rajaram from psychology and Dilip Grisapi from the material science and the College of Engineering. And their focus is to develop the framework to develop think tanks and strategy groups that will be able to identify emerging opportunities that align with our strengths as a university so that we can pursue those as successfully as we can. And also, this is where the entrepreneurial piece will fold in moving forward as we try to integrate that into our vision moving forward. The third working group is called Leveraging Existing Infrastructure, and it's co-chaired by Kevin Reed from the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences and Glenn Itzkowitz, who's the Associate Dean for Research Facilities and Operations on the east side of campus. And their focus is to look at space and facilities, two critical ingredients for research, and how they are administered as we go along this journey. So they'll look, for example, at renovating and upgrading existing space, allocating new space for research, and also reviewing space utilization to make sure we're using it most effectively. The fourth working group is called Implementing the Facilitator Research Success Recommendations. And this is the anomaly. There's not actually an additional committee to this. It's housed entirely within Rich Reeder's group in the Office of the Vice President for Research. It's headed by Rich and Nina Mong, and their focus is to identify the remaining recommendations from the Facilitating Research Study and incorporate those and identify those that are most promising. And with that, I think, Rose, we'll turn it over to you for assessment of some surveys that we've done.
Thank you, John. John and Anissa, thank you so much. So I want to just share a little bit of information about the survey that we conducted just before the holidays. We closed that survey last week, and we had more than 2,200 people respond, which is really wonderful. And you can see some of the demographics here on the slide. I just wanted to share two pieces of information that I thought was very inspiring. Despite the challenges, financial challenges that we're experiencing, more than 2/3 of our faculty, staff, and administrators felt confident in executive leadership in helping us to navigate these changes. And greater than 2/3 felt similarly that even though it's difficult for my department to make change, I can make those changes, and it's done at the individual level. So when we're facing all this change, and I think one of the things that's really important is the type of environment we're in at this point really requires each and every one of us to engage in the culture of change, whether it's small things that I can do within my office or adjust to some of the more technology and or process changes that will be coming. And it really is about us. And so I wanted to share that we have great hope in ourselves, despite some of the challenges that we face in the near term. And I thought that was really worthwhile sharing with you today. All right, so let's now get into the questions. Just a reminder as we start, I want to just encourage you to do the best that you can. And some of these questions might be inside or outside of our purview of the task force. But we'll do the very best that we can today. So thank you so much. All right. So how do you incentivize faculty to want to make them do more research? I'm going to go with you, John.
So that's a very important question. And I think when it comes to something like research, it's again, it's a creative endeavor. You can't push a rope. And so it has to be something that is encouraged and fostered. I think there are several elements that can be brought into play in this regard. One is recognition of researcher success, and that might be something as simple as an announcement out to the department or something on the website that illustrates a particular award that was won. It could also be, for example, nominating a faculty member for an award in their profession as a result of success, or, for example, Distinguished Professor here at Stony Brook, which is an honorific that's given. But importantly, to recognize that at the end of the day, we're humans, right? And it's nice to have someone say, hey, you did a nice job. The second is reward, and this is more where something is given to a person as a result of success. And it could be a reduction in teaching load or service. It might be a discretionary pay increase. It might be an early promotion for a junior faculty member. It might be the opportunity to go to a conference in an area they know nothing about, just to be able to explore. And then the third would be support. So once a faculty or a department or the campus, for that matter, is up and running, to try to sustain that. And again, basically get out of their way and let them do what they do very well. In the end, it's a very personal thing. It's obviously will be different for each faculty member. I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all solution, but trying to incentivize research the best we can, I think will be good for all of us.
Thank you. Anissa, why the focus on targeting large grants and training grants as part of our approach?
Thank you, Rose, for this question. Let me first clarify that when we say targeting large grants and training grants, that is not meaning to ignore small grants. It's just that in these two areas, we're not doing as well as with smaller grants. So, but the importance of smaller grants cannot be overstated. Now, why the focus on large grants and training grants? So, first, we have few of those, and that is a big gap. Large grants will get us to where we need to be in terms of federal expenditures a little faster than small grants. The amount of money is bigger. The indirect costs are larger, so that will help with the deficit. And they have the advantage of bringing together a large multidisciplinary group of people to work together. And that is part of the mission or part of the emphasis of this task force, is that how do we have people talk to each other that may not necessarily collaborate? A large grant is a great way of a mechanism for achieving that. Training grants are also very important in terms of increasing research expenditures. That's because you have students in your lab that are supported by a training grant that you don't have to pay for out of your own grants, but yet contribute to the research productivity and may submit their own grants one day. So it's kind of an exponential way of increasing research expenditure. But in addition, it allows us to fulfill our mission of education. Research education is extremely important, and it's really the way to the future. You know, new ways of teaching, new research, novel research, it all starts with, you know, a creative, a very smart student in the lab has a great idea. And also training grants bring together a group of mentors to submit what is kind of a large training grant together. So it achieves multiple areas of, somewhat weaknesses that we want to address all at once.
Great. Thank you, Anissa. John, let me give this one to you. Are there efforts to integrate research with other campus missions, for example, education and departments with others, to break down those silos?
Yes, definitely. This is something I think that is front and center on our radar screen, and this has come up a number of times in the task forces to recognize the opportunities that are there. And it's going to be a journey. I mean, again, this is not a box that's checked, but an interesting example came up of the analysis of artwork from folks that do chemical analysis. And that's been done before, but in this case, they were looking actually at the canvas underneath, which is something I guess that hadn't been explored very much. And again, that's kind of the amalgamation of two fields of art, say, and chemical analysis that normally may not speak together. And the idea, I think, is to foster that. And our hope is that if we can put together basically a catalyst or a mechanism just to get folks to talk in the first place. Then the ideas will happen. And that might be as simple as a mixer, for example, where you try to get folks from different departments and maybe put them together and have some fun in games. I mean, it doesn't have to be a high-profile formal affair, just to get people talking. And then I think the ideas will flow and move forward. And then, of course, the education component of that will also follow, I think, very naturally.
That's great. One of the things that I've heard, I had a student reach out to me today and really express concern. If we're putting so much energy into research, what does that mean for me as a student? You know, how will that benefit me? And so I would love to get a little bit of your perspective about the power of research and the power of teaching as the connections, but speak to the student about that. Why don't you start there, and I'll pass it over to Anissa as well.
Yeah, that's a very legitimate question, and I think even the broader, it begs the broader question of, as a research university, how do you contribute to education? I think one thing, and those of us that have pursued a career in research, we recognize how intoxicating it can be to come up with an idea and work on it and discover it and expand it. And that's a very unique and special experience. And I think if we can translate that to the students, even at the undergraduate level, and engage them and say, hey, this is an opportunity that you know, a traditional four-year degree may not necessarily expose you to, but if you're interested, here's some things that you might think about doing. And there's a lot of benefits to that. I think it ties to what the studies that they're doing, which sometimes can appear to be in the abstract and not attached to reality, to show, in fact, that there is relevance to this, as well as potentially sway some of them to think about a career in research as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anissa, do you want to add anything?
Well, you know, I think researchers are mentors, so they're educators. There's really, in my mind, no conflict between these two areas. They go hand in hand. Having more research opportunities gives opportunities to a student to join a lab, to work on a project, as John said, but also to hear from somebody who may know a lot about a certain topic. So, you know, researchers are educators in some way, maybe not that's not their main activity, but they're contributing to the educational mission.
Thank you. That's very helpful. The next question is probably more for me. It's what is the timing and prioritization of initiatives, and who will decide this? So as part of the strategic budget initiative, we actually have this cascade. We have the working groups right now that are developing and assessing and validating the various ideas in their analysis. That will then come up to the task forces for you all to start to commonly evaluate and prioritize them. Then it comes up to the Financial Sustainability Committee. We take these hundreds of ideas and we prioritize them and help to sequence them for leadership development or for leadership approval process. Once that happens, it cascades back down into implementation plan, but it is really executive leadership that will make the decision. We play a huge role in informing the decision by the work that we're doing, but ultimately it is the institution and our leadership that will make the final decision. Next question: will there be new resources invested, especially at this time, to address these issues? John,
we better.
That's exactly right.
I think obviously all of us are aware that this is a pretty unique time that we're in, and a big part of what we're doing is to navigate through the situation that COVID has put us in. So in many respects, it's a dire situation, but with that comes opportunity, right? In other words, something must be done if we're going to survive. We'll probably change a little bit along the way. And I think at least from what I've seen, the upper administration is aware of this as well, and is part of the reason that we're doing this exercise in the first place.
Yeah. I think the hardest part is we would like to move a mountain all at once. There's so many opportunities. It will be more about how do we sequence the initiatives in ways that begin to open up opportunities, whether it's cost reductions or new revenues that we can then invest in again in ourselves. And I think the sequence and the patience by which we build this roadmap or series of stair steps to the future will be important, but we've got to spend money in order to really accelerate our ability to reach our ambitions. And so that's what this is all about. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to do that. But it is, we're going to have to work collectively together for sure. All right, next question here. Much of this was already done 3 years ago with facilitating research success study. Why are we wasting time redoing this now? What is different now with this effort? Anissa.
Well, I certainly do not want to be thinking that we're wasting our time. I definitely believe that this process is different this time around. I think we have a challenge and an opportunity to meet this challenge to grow. If we do nothing, we're not going to survive very well. So we really have the obligation of doing something this time around. There's obviously multiple layers of new leadership. There is enthusiasm and optimism. There's also a convergence of different people working on this effort together. I mean, the vast amount of faculty that is involved in this process gives me hope that they're all working towards a common goal and that there will be investment in to kind of get to the finish line of this process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. What I find so unique is that the various groups, the intersectional nature of the work that we're doing. It was so many things that were in the FRS study are now being managed by a group working on procurement around travel for some of the challenges that we have in hiring and recruiting. And so they were actually large challenges that existed but could be addressed much more holistically from this type of approach. So it's interesting how they're all kind of coming together, and the areas of opportunity are coalescing around a few areas that are really important for us to truly solve. So that's what's exciting for me from this vantage point. All right, have you looked at other institutions to see how they have addressed these concerns? John?
That's a great question, and this actually is near and dear to my heart. I think sometimes spending a lot of effort to solve a problem that's already been done, when if one could simply be aware of the solution that was implemented in the past, is a huge time saver, and obviously given the resources that we have. So I really would like to see us take advantage of this as much as we can. Now, with that said, I guess to answer the question, there are a couple of external factors that have come into play in our studies. One is that we do have a consulting firm, EAB, and they are in the business of facilitating institutions to help them through this process. And they have a perspective that that we don't, in the sense that they've seen a far larger portfolio of institutions. And we have spoken to them in the past. We plan to speak to them again in the future. The other thing that was kind of a diamond in the rough is that it turns out that, not surprisingly, there's a number of faculty that did not spend their entire career at Stony Brook, and they were at other institutions, and then they've come. And they have a unique vantage point in that they've been able to juxtapose how things were done at their other institution and here, both better and worse. And this has already come up, for example, in the task force. And we've had folks say, well, at institution X, where I spent some time, this is actually how we address that problem. And I think that kind of feedback is really critical, because otherwise you can kind of get into an infinite loop where you just kind of iterate without having any external influence. And, what would be really interesting, I mean, just to kind of to kind of throw an idea out there is, moving forward, and it doesn't even have to happen in the next few months when we're doing this, but at some point, it would be really neat to take a group, a strategic group, say, of administrators or administrators and faculty, whomever, and maybe even with some other peer institutions, have everyone have a group and just have that group visit another institution for a week and cycle through their operations, and then round robin, and so that every institution has had a chance to see every other institution, and then put together, for example, a result of best practices and things that they found. To me, I think something like that would be really extraordinary in terms of not reinventing the wheel.
I completely agree. Thank you. Why is the AAU important to Stony Brook and this activity? Anissa?
Yeah, I think there was such an importance to AAU membership that all task force members were kind of aware of, that we spent quite a bit of time reviewing the metrics, reviewing the numbers. First, it's really important that we're members of AU. This is a great honor, and it means that we are a high-profile academic institution that is respected among our peers. The problem is only like where we sit. We're too close to the bottom, so there's a little bit of risk there, and we need to improve it. Why is that important? Because being part of this great institution of the AU means that we can attract funding for research and we can attract better students. If we lose membership, it will be at a great cost to our reputation. Some of the institutions that have lost their memberships have paid a great price. So we really cannot afford to take that risk. And again, it's a membership that is based on a comprehensive kind of impact of everybody across all fields. Everybody can contribute, arts, humanities, and science. Right. It's important to pay attention to that. Right.
And I think what's really interesting about these types of comparators, it allows us to see, in many ways, to set some metrics, to be able to measure how we are performing. It's easy to just look internally and say we're doing great, but everybody's doing great, and are we great at the same rate of great as others are great? But to really begin to understand how we complement within this, what areas of opportunity we have, whether it's in research or education, books, citations, all those things are so important. But metrics, it's a good thing to hold ourselves to as we're trying to do that within this initiative. So, yeah, understood. Okay, would our AAU rank improve if we had less non-funded tenure faculty?
So, I think that the most important metric is the global research expenditures and not so much the ratio. Obviously, that is important because, if you're getting more money with fewer faculty, that metric will improve. But I don't think that that's the most essential metric because, these kind of tenure track and tenure appointments differ across universities. So I wouldn't go with this as one way of improving our AU membership ranking, because also we want to grow research. We don't want to kind of like reduce it by reducing the number of people. If you reduce number of people, the risk is that we will reduce research as a whole. So I think the better way of thinking about it is to increase the overall research and not reduce the FTE numbers. Yeah. I don't know, John, if you want to add anything because you're good with numbers.
No, I think it's a good point. The other comment I would make is that there are institutions that are similar to ours that have a comprehensive liberal arts program in many of the departments we do, and they do very well. So it is possible to excel in the AAU rankings regardless of your constituency, or I should say constituencies very similar to ours. So I don't know that manipulating that is even a good idea if we could. I think I'd rather see us just improve in the same manner that these other institutions were able to do so.
That's a good point. Thanks, John and Anissa. All right. How do you define research productivity? Research dollars, products, publications? Go back to Anissa. This is you.
Well, all of it. All of it is important. To have funding, but then not produce results in terms of either products or publications is kind of a little bit of waste of funding. But you also can't have products without funding. So they all kind of go hand in hand. Now, there are for, non-STEM fields there are ways of having publications without necessarily research funding associated with it, and that is very important. High-profile publications, books that earn prizes, memberships and exclusive associations. All of that is important. But in terms of the type of research productivity we're talking about, all these metrics are very important.
That's great. This next question is wonderful. This is my big passion, is graduate education. So, how do you modernize graduate school training to integrate with planned application for cross-discipline center and training grants? I'm going to go with you, John.
That's a great question, and also an important one, and I think an involved one. I guess the first observation well, I think primarily it would have to be best done as a grassroots effort. In other words, you have some faculty, for example, that begin to work with some other faculty on a new area, or maybe they bridge an area or define a new area. And then they bring the students into that mix and get the students started in that. Also, it can come from the administration, again, perhaps from seed grants or other unique funding opportunities that mandate that there be some cross-fertilization, for example. And then those are the seeds that begin to grow, and eventually new fields will develop out of that. To give you one example from my own local neck of the woods, is this idea of nanotechnology, which really originally was the bridging of engineering and applied physics. And what happened is that the members of the two communities began to work together and overlap, and now this brand new field has kind of come out. And then, of course, once that's happened, and you have established leaders in the field, then they have their subsequent students and so on, and then it becomes self-sustaining. So I think it's a doable thing. I think it's probably straightforward, and it's something that would need to be cultivated along the way as we do it.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Anissa, why are only federal research expenditures in your analysis? What about incorporating non-federal funding and industry?
Yes, so what I was referring to is one of the metric of the AU, which is federal expenditure. That doesn't mean that that's the only factor that's important for us. I mean, obviously, industry-related funding is very important, and one of the study groups will focus on that in terms of increasing entrepreneurial activities, licensing, industry relationships. That will be focus of study group 2, at least. And also for AAU metrics, some of the research expenditures do go into a metric that is separate from the federal expenditures. We use the federal expenditure one just to show the ranking, because that kind of affects the ranking. The biggest funding is usually federal funding. But that is definitely not the only metric, neither for AU nor for us in terms of our thinking about how to grow research.
Great, thank you. Last question. John, and to both of you, how can I get involved?
Great question. And I guess the first answer is we hope that you do. Please. I mean, I think I ran the numbers, and I think all told in the 5 task force, there's maybe 20% of the faculty is currently engaged, which in itself is an interesting testament. I think globally, act locally, and that could be anything from perhaps volunteering for an opportunity to be engaged either with this force or task force or some of the subsequent ones that follow on. If an announcement comes out, for example, on the campus announcements that there might be a workshop or the opportunity to get together, maybe think about attending, again, in the interest of cross-fertilizing, or perhaps take an initiative yourself. Say, I want to bridge. I want to establish a bridge to Department X, and I'm going to do that by setting up a workshop, and anybody can come that they want, and we'll have coffee and talk about it. So be innovative, be entrepreneurial, and then let us know how we can help as well. I think, again, there's a large representation of faculty. We are you, right? We are you, and so we understand. We've been here, many of us, for a long time, and if there's an opportunity that we can help, I think we'd be delighted to do so.
Thanks, John. Any closing words from you, Anissa, on getting involved?
Yeah, I just want to say that this is a tremendous opportunity for growth. Obviously, we started from a point of view of financial sustainability and crisis and saving costs, saving on inefficiencies, etc. And we really come out with recommendations where it's more about investing in research. And I think that we need to invest to be able to have the long-term benefits. We cannot grow if we don't invest now in modernizing our research infrastructure, bringing it to where we need to be able to do the work we want to do, and then investing in bringing our community together so we could come up with novel, creative initiatives that's going to jumpstart our research operation, take it where we need to be.
That's great. Thank you so much. Anissa, John, Thank you so much for serving as co-chairs. I've learned so much, and I know you're spending enormous amounts of time helping to lead that initiative, and we're really making great progress, so thank you. I want to thank all the faculty, staff, and administrators who are serving on this task force and the various now new working groups that are being launched. Your input, your time, your energy is incredibly important, and I thank you for your time. Lastly, for those who joined us, more than 525 registered for today's session, and I hope that you all were able to hear more about our research and innovation plans and find ways to get involved. If we did not get to your questions, please recognize we will be updating our Q&A on the website in a regular way, and more information, again, will be on the website as we begin to move into the next stages of the working group in step 3. Lastly, you know, if you have expertise, if you have a point of view, step up, step in. We need your help. We need your guidance. We're doing a great job trying to make sure that we're hearing from everyone, but we really welcome your feedback and your guidance as we go forward. So please reach out to us either through the Financial Sustainability website, emailing me directly, or Anissa or John. We stand ready to hear and incorporate your feedback. So thank you so much for your time today. Thank you again, Anissa and John. We are excited by this work and look forward to sharing more about this over the coming months as we pursue the rest of this project through the end of April. So thank you and have a good rest of the day.